Denver School Board does a 180, from every member opposed to police in schools to every member in favor. Officers will be at high schools through the end of the year. Then what? And let's stop to ask another important question. Do police as school resource officers work? We'll hear from Denver Schools' former head of security and look at what the research shows. And what about the racial equity concerns that led to police being pulled from schools 3 years ago? We go back to community leaders for their views now.
So it's hard for us as a community to always trust the police. But in situations like this, we know this violence is occurring.
And 2 years after the January 6th Capitol attack, when a Colorado tech CEO bragged about the first guy to storm the Capitol, the feds say they found the guy and arrested him. All that is next. The Denver School Board is now acknowledging what students, parents, and staff have been begging them to see, that violence in Denver schools is an emergency. So today, the school board unanimously agreed to let police back into schools, 3 years after unanimously banning police from schools. Tonight, we're going to take a step back to examine a question that's largely been skipped over since yesterday's shooting at East High. Do school resource officers work? Do they make schools safer? And safer for which students? First, what's happened today. There will not be class in Denver schools tomorrow, Mental Health Day for every student ahead of next week's school break. Class had already been canceled at East, where 2 administrators were shot by a student who later took his own life in the high country yesterday. And the school board is backing Superintendent Dr. Alex Marrera, who brought the police back with an announcement yesterday without the board's permission.
It did happen inside of our buildings, so that changes things significantly, hence why I decided to act the way that I did, and I was incredibly reassured and encouraged when I learned that the board was incredibly supportive, but also are going to push me a bit further on how to support our schools moving forward.
A board resolution today suspends the ban on armed officers in schools through June and calls it an emergency situation. The board is asking the city of Denver for help with funding to place those armed officers and mental health professionals at all high schools through the end of the school year. There's been an urgency to return police to Denver schools, despite the significant amount of research that shows that armed officers in schools do not deter violence, in particular, shootings. The former head of safety for Denver Public Schools told our Marshall Zellinger today he thinks armed officers are a good idea, regardless of what the research says.
Motion passes.
When the school board removed armed school resource officers from Denver Public Schools in 2020, Mike Eaton was in charge of district security.
I can't say I felt it became less safe. I felt like it was the wrong decision.
Eaton, who now works out of state but happened to be in Denver for training, advocates for armed Denver police officers in schools. DPS has campus security, even a dispatch center that can monitor those schools. But DPS campus security officers inside schools are unarmed.
Having those SROs in schools not only creates a deterrence for activity that occurred yesterday, but also creates intelligence, relationship building, and opportunities to prevent something like that.
Several national studies, however, looked at historical cases and determined SROs do not equal a deterrent. This study from the University of Albany and the research group called RAND found that between 2014 and 2018, SROs effectively reduced some violence in schools, but not gun-related incidents. And this study from a couple of universities in St. Paul, Minnesota, looked at school shootings from 1980 to 2019 and found no connection between an armed officer and a deterrence of violence.
We look at other options. We continue to challenge the process and look at other school safety options, but it doesn't mean we just pull them out.
When SROs were pulled from DPS in 2020, it was in part because the school board was concerned with statistics that showed the majority of students arrested or ticketed were minority students. Eaton suggested the stats are skewed because they can include officers that are not SROs that were called to a school to respond to an incident involving a student.
That officer didn't have connections to those schools. They didn't have connections with those kids. And so they were less likely to refer that issue into discipline or look at other restorative ways to handle it.
Even with SROs, they would not be involved in a pat-down search of a student with a safety plan, like at East High School on Wednesday. That would still be DPS security or staff.
Now that we know SROs are coming back, who will they be? Eaton hopes that DPD sends the officers who were already SROs back to the schools. Yesterday, former Jeffco Public Safety Chief John McDonald told me Not every officer belongs in a school because not all officers want to work with kids. Eaton said that schools for the rest of the year may have to get whoever is available, but that it should be a decision by the school and the community, almost like everybody apply, let's look through your application, who's going to work best with kids? Okay, we prefer this one. DPD, what are you going to do?
And I think a lot of the conversation has kind of been simplified into this idea of like, well, either school resource officers are the solution and don't worry about the consequences, or they're absolutely not the solution and they serve no good. But when you look at the research, it is a mixed bag, that the idea that they prevent some fights and some other low-level incidents, but did not appear to have a discernible impact on things like school shootings, which is what so many people are worried about.
I know the research says if you're going to do a school shooting, your mindset is of a way, does it matter if there's that armed person there? But there are other incidents where it's like, okay, if I do this, I know that person's right there. Maybe that's going to keep me from doing it. But I just want to reiterate, as to yesterday's situation, when it comes to threat assessments, SROs have nothing to do with that. When it comes to safety plans, SROs have nothing to do with that. So you still have that component, and maybe you just add on the SRO to wander the halls, make connections with the students, and then be there faster for other things.
Yep. And we got to remember, there are policies that can have pros and cons at the same time. Let's talk more about that. Marshall, thank you. So Denver schools got rid of those officers at a time when a number of districts nationwide were doing the same thing. It was during the racial justice protests of 2020. And the concern here in Denver and elsewhere is that black and brown students were being disproportionately ticketed or arrested. DPS directly cited that in their original resolution. Our Luis De Leon checked back in with community members today who told him that they have hope that more security might come with more understanding this time.
The situation at East High Wednesday brought out all sorts of emotions. For Milo Marquez,
Guilt because we could have solved some of these problems earlier. We haven't done that.
his involvement with Denver Public Schools spans generations, and as an alum himself, he now chairs the Latino Education Coalition.
We feel that policing shouldn't be the only solution.
He says the coalition supports the move for more armed officers in schools, but not without acknowledgement.
We want to make sure that the folks that are in the schools, that are working with them, police officers, SROs, have the training necessary to understand the trauma that our community has faced historically by the targeting of our students.
That sentiment is part of what led to the district choosing to transition away from SROs in 2020. Back then, it was based on data showing that the majority of DPS students ticketed or arrested were black and Latino between the ages of 10 and 15. Similar trends across the country can vary depending on the report. A 2021 study from the Annenberg Institute with Brown University reported that SROs intensify the use of things like suspensions and police referrals, and they say that impacts black students consistently 2 times more than white students.
This really is about relationship-based policing.
Mo Kennedy is executive director of the National Association of School Resource Officers. He says they implemented a block of their training to cultural diversity nearly a decade ago and constantly work to enhance it.
We get to a point that we're really training these officers to use their frames of reference in a proper way. Not only how maybe they were raised or where they lived and went to school, but how that can now relate to how they work with students in that school environment that they're in now.
As for Marquez, he knows the division is there, but ultimately...
But in situations like this, we know this violence is occurring. We know we need to find solutions. We know we need that support.
So right now, state law actually only encourages a school resource officer to complete SRO training or curriculum. A bipartisan bill right now under consideration would actually require that, and once a year. Kyle, it's currently going through the House Education Committee.
Some of this, Luis, seems like it's also about the expectations that a community puts on an SRO. We know in greater society that we're asking too much of police officers already to be social workers and housing officers and everything else. Just putting an SRO in a school is not necessarily going to help kids with a mental health issue. Might be able to do all kinds of other things.
And to that end, Marquez adds that he believes that more of the nonprofit organizations that are actually already establishing some of the relationships with these kids that come from all types of backgrounds, they should be the ones also having a hand at helping out the SROs kind of, establish those relationships, forward the work. It'll be interesting to see how this goes.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Luis. A Colorado tech CEO's Facebook post is now being used as evidence in a new prosecution for the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. BDR AI founder Chad Burmeister of Littleton posted a photo on January 6th, posing alongside a guy flashing a single finger with the caption, "First guy to storm the Capitol today." Federal agents were very interested in that. but it took them more than 2 years to build enough evidence to arrest that guy earlier this month. Let's go back to January 6, 2021. Trump supporters stormed the Capitol as Congress was trying to certify the election. Let's look at a photo. The guy on the left is Chad Burmeister from Littleton, a tech CEO who led ScaleX and now BDR AI. Burmeister had gone to Washington for the Trump rally and written, "We will vote with our voices and ultimately guns." Burmeister told 9 News, "We couldn't show you this photo." The guy on the right, he's been a mystery. Till now. First guy to storm the Capitol today, read Burmeister's post on January 6, changed the next morning to read, "Peaceful march to the Capitol." Burmeister says he didn't enter the Capitol. He has not been arrested or charged with a crime. The number one man hadn't been either until this month. The feds say he's Kenneth Schulz, and they say the brag about being the first guy to storm the Capitol isn't far off. Investigators say this is Schulz right outside the Capitol and inside the Capitol. They say he was inside the west side within 30 seconds of when it was breached. Included in the feds' evidence is Burmeister's photo, which investigators said helped them to recognize Schulz, who was arrested this month, more than 2 years after the January 6th attack. Burmeister did not respond to our request for comment through his attorney. We should add, after our first report on Burmeister in January of 2021, he sued me and 9 News' parent company for defamation. Last March, a judge dismissed Burmeister's lawsuit. He's currently appealing that decision. East High School students won't let state legislators off the hook. With school canceled after the shooting, students went to the Capitol for face-to-face conversations about gun violence. And a parent caught up in yesterday's lockdown gets a glimpse of what we ask kids to face over and over again.
To experience it was really heartbreaking.
Her new insight, next. Sadly, some East High School students may soon be on a first-name basis with state legislators because they were back at the Capitol again today, talking one-on-one with legislators about gun violence and asking them to pass the gun control bills proposed by Democrats.
Contact the governor, contact your House rep. Which ones do you think won't have an impact?
I actually don't think many of them will.
Why not?
Because there'll still be access to firearms.
The students are working with gun control advocates like the group Students Demand Action. The bills that they support would raise the minimum age to buy a gun in Colorado, require a 3-day waiting period to purchase a firearm, expand the state's red flag law, and remove some liability protection for gun manufacturers. East High students have been testifying in support of these bills, along with other young gun violence survivors from around the state. And you hear them say again and again, they think that it's unfair that the activism has to fall on them.
It's definitely not in a position we should be in, but it's where we are, and I will stand here until we have the change that is needed.
I wish I wasn't standing here this morning. It's important for me to be here, and I strongly support, and I'm glad that I'm here supporting this, but it shouldn't be my responsibility. I'm 18 years old. You know, there are plenty of other things I could be doing on a Thursday morning over my spring break, and it shouldn't have to be about gun violence prevention bills.
Democrats control the Capitol. Republicans do not have the votes to stop any of these bills, so the only way they wouldn't pass is if there is some Democratic opposition. Today, Republican lawmakers expressed concern that the bills in question would not have prevented the violence at East High School. Heard the students say in return that they think that this year's bills are just a starting point.
Nice to have a little sunshine kick off the day, but certainly this afternoon through this evening, the clouds starting to push in. Been monitoring a couple of flurries up into the high country as another wave rolls in. Across downtown, tough to even see the foothills in the distance. Maybe a little bit of sunshine trying to sneak through. This afternoon, pretty mild in the 50s across the urban corridor off to the eastern plains with 30s and low 40s up in the mountains. We'll zoom in out there because that's where most of the action is tonight. We'll be watching more snow fill in overnight into tomorrow. A couple of light little rain showers cruising across Fort Collins, heading off just north of Greeley. We zoom out, and here is our next storm system, kind of wave after wave that will be diving into Colorado. Tonight, by about 10 p.m., a little rain snow mix possible here in Denver as it shifts off to the east. Overnight into early tomorrow morning, we'll Get a brief break, a little bit of sunshine to kick off the day, and then here we go again. Some more rain showers, followed by another strong round of snow up into the mountains. The advisories don't go into effect until lunchtime tomorrow, but out across our northern mountains, 4 to 8 inches of new snowfall stacking up. Again, another day in the 50s for many of us here in the metro area, but possibly a couple of inches early Saturday morning. A cool weekend before another warm-up by the middle of next week.
East High has dealt with shootings and lockdowns and other security issues this year.
I'm just prayerful that we'll find a way to figure out how we end it.
A mother's chance visit to East put her in the middle of yesterday's lockdown and left her wanting better for her son and other kids. That's next. Most parents do not go through the lockdowns experienced by their students. A mother named Kimberly Lucas just happened to be at East yesterday, dropping off some things for her son, who's a sophomore, right when the students went on lockdown. And it gave her firsthand experience few parents have.
There was a part of it that was almost surreal, right? Like, is this happening? My name is Kim Lucas, and I am the Bishop of the Episcopal Church in Colorado. So yesterday morning started off like any other morning, trying to get my twins off to school. One of them is a student at East. He got to school and he texted me, "Oh, Mom, I forgot my materials for my Spanish class. Can you drop them off?" And I said, "Sure." But as I walked in the door, I heard all of these sirens happening and realized sort of out of the corner of my eye they were coming to East. Some police officers rushed in as I walked into the school, at which point one of the teachers snatched me and said, "We're on lockdown." And so they squirreled me off into an office right off the lobby. Over the course of a couple of years, my son has sent me texts, "Mom, we're in lockdown." And my response is, "Well, are you okay? What's going on? We don't know yet, I'll let you know." But to experience it was really heartbreaking. Heartbreaking for me to see kids frightened, to see teachers frightened, to be there with teachers asking, how many shootings do we need before we do something? How many does it take? In my tenure as bishop, I don't remember a year where I haven't had to communicate a message about gun violence. That's exhausting. It's exhausting and it's painful. And I'm just prayerful that we'll find a way to figure out how we end it.
Back with your feedback about school resource officers next. Been reading a stack of your thoughtful feedback on SROs. Jan writes, "Say, just retired as a DPS high school teacher for the main reason that I was terrified of my job on a daily basis." She says, "We had an amazing SRO who had a great relationship with students and staff." And Jan says, "I'm so happy they're coming back, but not enough to go back into teaching." B. Smith said, "Children are going to school, not prison. Spend that money on ensuring that students are fed, housed, and safe." Interesting suggestion from Eric, who said that he thinks the SRO should be a dedicated career path where candidates get both law enforcement and socio-emotional child development training. That's a thoughtful suggestion. See you next time.